A short while ago, former President Jacob Zuma informed members of the media in Soweto that he will neither campaign nor vote for the governing ANC in the 2024 general elections. The 81-year-old says he will instead vote for New Kids on the Block, Umkhonto weSizwe. At the same time, the statesman claims that he will remain an ANC member in good standing. But to help us unpack the implications of Zuma's announcement and what the ANC's reaction could possibly be, we're joined now by political analyst Dr. Dale Mckinley. Dr. Mckinley, appreciate your time this evening. Seems a little bit of a contradiction, does it not? I will remain a loyal and devoted member of the ANC, but I will not vote for the ANC. In fact, I will encourage other people to vote for the new MK party.
Yes, indeed, it is a bit of a contradiction. It's akin to someone betting, spreading their bets. In other words, if you lose on one, you might gain on the other. And in some ways, I don't think it is going to go down particularly well. It would have been better, I would argue, that President Zuma had cut ties completely with the ANC, said, I'm done with it. I can't vote for it anymore. I can't be part of it anymore. I'm forming a new political formation, and let people move with him. This decision, in some ways, I think will confuse a lot of people because he wants to obviously hold on to the ANC because the backdrop to this explanation is, I'm here to rescue the ANC. That's what he kept saying. We're here to rescue, to go back to the ANC that we knew, and so forth and so on. And so he doesn't want to break those ties, but yet he wants a new political formation to use to pressure the ANC. And it doesn't make a great deal of sense politically, particularly 5 months before an election. So I think many of us are left wondering what the tactical meaning of this is.
Well, Jacob Zuma is a tactician of note, so obviously he's got something up his sleeve. And the big question is, how is the ANC likely to react? Will they keep him as an ANC member?
Well, my reading of it would be that the ANC would not proceed to expel Jacob Zuma because then that could be politically damaging for them, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, where he still has a fairly sizable following, and he still has many loyalists within the ANC itself around the country. So doing that before the elections, I would think would be not a particularly politically smart move. My sense would be that the ANC will try to point out the contradictions in what Jacob Zuma is trying to say, and trying to basically say that he's trying to have it both ways. That you can't say that you are going to be a loyal and disciplined member of a party and then basically attack that party and essentially ask people to vote for a different party at the same time. So my sense is they're going to try to delegitimize what he's been saying and try to undermine his message as opposed to expelling him.
So, Dr. Mckinley, therein lies your answer of how smart Jacob Zuma is. He's going to have his cake and eat it.
Well, not necessarily. Because it depends on what the bottom line is here. If your bottom line is simply to survive politically, well, then he could do that well within the ANC. He wasn't about to get expelled from the ANC. He still has support. If your bottom line is to regain power, then there's no precedent whatsoever in the entire history of the ANC of someone leaving the ANC effectively, even though not the membership, but if politically leaving the ANC and then coming back years later to capture the ANC again. It would be very difficult to imagine that scenario. There are many other players within the ANC. There are many other powerful factions within the ANC. Jacob Zuma is one of them. And I think if he's thinking that this tactic is going to result in somehow the RET faction regaining, when you look at what happened to the Secretary General, when you look at what happened to many of his former colleagues, I would think that would be not tactically very smart at all.
Now, can this move by Zuma have broader implications for the ANC's standing and support among the electorate, particularly in KZN?
Yeah, listen, I think it's definitely could make a difference in KZN. I think it could create a situation where the ANC would lose quite a number of votes that otherwise would have gone to itself, and that might take it into a position where coalition governments, whether that's with the EFF or whether that involves the DA or the IFP or whoever, probably the IFP more likely, remains to be seen. But I think that where the real damage is here is to the continuing reputation of the ANC. I mean, if you've got an ex-president and you've got two ex-presidents of the ANC essentially criticizing the party and saying it's lost its way, we don't vote for it, we're not going to campaign for it, but we are the real holders of the tradition, and yet they have no political power to make that happen, then what you're doing in the longer term is you're basically turning people away from the party. And in some ways, that could hurt the ANC overall, not just any particular political faction, in terms of regaining power in a situation where already it's weak in most provinces and has the possibility of having to enter into coalition governments on almost every front.
We're going to bring into the conversation via telephone Professor Lesiba Teffo. I appreciate you joining us this evening as we unpack that announcement by former President Jacob Zuma on his confirmation that he will not be voting for the ANC in next year's election, but voting for that new political party. Now, what do you believe is a primary motivation behind Jacob Zuma's decision to vote for the MK party?
Well, you need to, thanks for the invite. You need to go a little backwards, to understand who he is and where he comes from. Because there is no complication here. He is a man who's trying to come even with the ANC. He is a man who has got several grudges with the ANC. One of them, the buddies, the friends, the comrades he made, but voted at the last minute to get him out of office, nearly losing the pegs of office. That's one. Number two, the state capture for him was all about himself and not really about the state. And for that, his finger is directed at the comrades. Number three, he was in prison, right? And in his view, Ramaphosa was the architect thereof, right? And on that basis, he still feels that he wants to come even and he can bring down the ANC. But in his words, he says, I want to help rescue the ANC. By doing what I'm doing, I'm saying, guys, wake up. In the same vein that Mavuso Msimang, who resigned and retracted, unfortunately, and watered down his stature in more ways than one. But that said, I think the message is that I want to save the ANC. And I think he's a smart fellow. I hear my colleagues or the other panelists say, Jacob Zuma is a genius when it comes to politics. What is really his announcement here today? It's almost nothing but something. Because the expectation is that he was going to form a political party. He said, no, I'm not forming a political party. It has been formed, but I gave it my blessing. Are you leaving the ANC? No, I'm not leaving the ANC. I'm trying to save the ANC by supporting this. And indeed, same was said by Thabo Mbeki, right? That I cannot campaign for a party whose leaders, among others, are known criminals in the villages and in the township. But I'm not going to stop there. Mbeki stopped there, but I'm taking a step to help save the party.
Now, Dr. Mckinley, it's pretty obvious from what Jacob Zuma said. So let's talk about the dissatisfaction expressed with the current state of the ANC under President Cyril Ramaphosa. And he says he will not support Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC. He seems like a man who's pretty aggrieved.
Well, this is a politics of grievance. I mean, what Lesiba is saying is absolutely correct. It's a personal issue. It's a personal grudge. It always has been about Jacob Zuma. It's been nothing but about Jacob Zuma. Through his entire administration, it was about himself. It's now about himself. And it's about what he is, his position, his legacy, his other things. I would read this as a desperate move. I don't read it as a smart move at all. I mean, he might appear smart. It might appear to be like slithering between the sort of contradictions. But in the longer term, politics is a brutal teacher. And in the sense, when you lose power and when you're out of power and you're trying to get back in or you're trying to re-influence, it's a very difficult task. And to do that on the basis of forming a political party 5 months before an election, trying to invoke the history of the ANC and trying to basically criticize everybody else except himself. If one listened to that entire press conference, it was as if of the 30-something years that we've had democracy, that the years from 2007 to 2017 didn't exist. There was nothing that happened. There was nothing bad that happened during those years. It was all good. And that tells a lot of people. You know, people in South Africa are fairly, I think, politically astute. And the reason why the ANC has lost its support is not simply because of Cyril Ramaphosa. It's not simply because of individuals. It's because the party itself has failed to deliver, irrespective of who has been in charge, including ex-President Zuma. So in that sense, I think that this sense tells me that he is desperate to have political relevance and to sort of have his name in the history books and not be remembered as somebody in a negative way, but a positive way, as opposed to any real attempt to try to regain political power.
Professor Teffo, I'll give you the last say in 60 seconds if you can. Now, what challenges and opportunities do you see for the newly formed MK party in gaining traction and support in the political landscape? They don't have much time, though.
That's the beauty of my country. A small country like us, small population and small economy, with not less than 400 political parties, with not less than 16 parties at the national level, what can they achieve? Almost zero, almost nothing. Safe to say, one, yes, this party, like others that have been formed in the past 2 years, they are likely to get a few seats in parliament. Will that impact the ANC's electoral base? Certainly it will. But not to the extent that they will unseat it completely from power. The ANC will go under 50, but will still be able to cobble at least a coalition with a relatively smaller parties that are not for consequence. I'm saying this precisely because 90% of the parties that were formed or that exist, all of them claim to be anti-ANC or they are anti-X or Z that the ANC does. But when it comes to coalition, they all are aspiring to be assimilated and accommodated. Therefore, it's about careerism. Therefore, it's about opportunities rather than the electorate, rather than the public. And for me, public office is about public service. It's about public spiritedness to serve the other and not the self.
Dr. Mckinley and Professor Lesiba, Teffo, political analysts, appreciate your time as they unpacked Jacob Zuma's announcement.